Good afternoon. I'm Roger Enlow with the Bridge Street History Center, and today is March 22nd, 2024, and we're here today with Jane McConal, and she's going to talk about her late husband, John McConal, who was a very talented Fort Worth Star-Telegram writer and columnist. He grew up in Glen Rose, Texas, and moved to Granbury with Jane. And the Bridge Street History Center will be doing a display on John McConal coming up. So, Jane, let's start off with asking you, how did you and John meet? Was it love at first sight?
No, it wasn't love at first sight. We had a blind date, and a mutual friend, set it up. She and I both had gone back to college after raising our families, and we met in Spanish class. And Ann and I became good friends, and her husband, Jim Gilliland, and John ran together, long distance running. So anyway, John and I both were single at the same time, and Ann thought we would hit it off, and we did.
What was the first date about? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I remember it. It was October 25th, 1980, and we went to a Greek restaurant in Oak Cliff. John was living in Fort Worth, and I was living in Arlington. And it was funny, when he called me to ask me to go out on a date, I really didn't want to go. And I made a million excuses, and I finally said, okay, I'll go. And at the time I thought, well, I'll tell him I'll go and I can cancel at the last minute. But I didn't, and I was really glad that I didn't.
So it went well then?
Oh, it went real well, yeah.
Then he asked you out again?
Oh yeah, we were an item from then on.
All right. Okay. So so it wasn't long after that y'all were married, I guess, right?
We married in 92. We met in 80, and we married in 82.
82.
In the summer of 82.
All right. Where was the marriage? Where did that happen?
We got married at a friend's house in Fort Worth. She lived real close to where John's home was, and Kathy Miller, we married in her house. And
before you went out with John, did you know that he was a writer?
I didn't know him at all. And I really wasn't that familiar with the Star-Telegram. I grew up in Northeast Texas, and we read the Dallas Morning News and Dallas Times-Herald. And, I knew the Star-Telegram, but I didn't really read it. I didn't know that much about it.
So that was probably because in North Texas, people who lived east of Dallas took the Dallas Morning News, and people west of Fort Worth took the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when did you find out that John was a writer?
Well, he told me that night.
That night. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Does that impress you?
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Probably.
Did he talk much about it?
I was just impressed with him. He was so much fun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he didn't talk much about his writing or
No,
that.
he didn't. Not then.
Yeah.
No.
What made him fun? What was it? What did you enjoy?
Well, he just had a cute sense of humor, and
Made you laugh?
joked a lot, and he was just easy to be with, easy to talk to.
Would he tell you stories about the writing and being on the newspaper and his experiences? Would he share some of that, or was not so much that?
No, later on, yeah, he did. After we dated a while and married, he told me he shared a lot of stories.
So after he told you that he was a writer, did you start reading the Star-Telegram and reading what he wrote?
Yeah.
Were you impressed with that?
I subscribed to the Star-Telegram.
Were you impressed with his writing?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah. Okay, you said that you and John, y'all did a lot of camping together,
Mm-hmm.
and that you really had never experienced much of that.
No, I hadn't.
But that you enjoyed that. So what were those camping trips like?
Well, we usually went to New Mexico or Colorado, and we had well, at first we just had a pickup and with a camper shell, and when we camped, I mean, a lot of times we slept in the camper shell, in the pickup, in the bed, with the camper shell, and then eventually we bought a pop-up trailer and camped with. I mean, took that everywhere, and we loved it. We had a great time.
So was it roughing it pretty good? I mean, was
Yeah,
it
it was.
outdoors and
It was outdoors, and a lot of places did not have facilities. It was it was really roughing it. But I've always enjoyed cooking, but I'd never cooked on an open fire, and I started doing it, and I enjoyed it. It was fun.
What would y'all eat? What would you cook?
Everything.
Would y'all fish?
I remember one time we were in Colorado, and a couple was camped near us, and he brought us mountain trout that he had just caught, and I cooked it, on the open fire, and oh my goodness, that was good.
It was good, huh?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Where did the two of you live after you were married, Jane?
We moved. John had a home in Fort Worth, and I sold my house in Arlington and moved to Fort Worth with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived there about 10 years before we came down here.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Now, when did the move to Granbury come about? How did that come about?
We, I guess we both wanted to get out of the city, and thought it would be nice to live on a lake somewhere. And we started looking around, and John's parents lived down right on 144. And of course we came down here a lot to visit them. And so we started looking around Lake Granbury. And in fact, this area was the very first area we looked at. And after looking several places, we came back, and this house came on the market. And so we bought it.
Would he talk much about Granbury and Hood County?
Oh yeah.
He was probably familiar with, growing up in Glen Rose, not far away, he was probably pretty familiar with Granbury.
He was, yeah.
Yeah. Did John tell you how he became interested in writing, Jane?
He loved to read, and I know he had two English teachers that encouraged him.
In high school, or?
I think they were, I know one of them was in high school, and I'm not sure about the other one, but I think both of them encouraged him to write. And I think honestly, I just think it came natural to him. He really enjoyed reading, he enjoyed expressing his thoughts in writing. And one thing that I thought was always funny, he told me he had hoed enough mesquite trees, he didn't want to do that the rest of his life. So he preferred writing.
And that was probably in Glen Rose where he did a lot of that,
Yeah.
right? Did he talk much about in Glen Rose the moon shining, the cedar choppers, cedar hackers, or
A little bit, but not a whole lot. I mean, once in a while it would come up, but I don't remember him ever telling me much about that.
You said that John loved to read. What kind of books did he like to read?
Well, he liked John Steinbeck and John Graves and Stephen King. He read all the time, honestly. He loved history. Read a lot of history books. And
when y'all would go on these trips, these camping trips, or maybe other trips, would you go to places that had history, a lot of history to the place or to wherever you would go?
we didn't go because of the history, but, there was, there's always something to learn no matter where you are, and he was always interested in the history of wherever we were.
Did he read newspapers and magazines too, along with books, or do you recall?
He did. He didn't. He read books more than anything.
Do you know that if he patterned his writing style after any particular author that he admired, or did he just come up with his own, or do you know?
I don't think he intentionally patterned his style after anybody. Like I said, John was easy to talk to. He was very matter of fact. He just he wrote things as he saw them or as he felt about them.
Was he away from home a lot, working on stories and interviewing people, or would he do it here on the phone?
He always interviewed his interviewees in person. I don't think he ever interviewed on the phone. So yeah, he would. But a lot of times it would just be a day trip, and then sometimes after he started writing his column, if he had 2 or 3 people that were a couple or 3 hours away, he would be gone overnight and do 2 or 3 interviews in one trip.
Did you ever see John interview his subjects?
I did.
And how did that go? What kind of interviewer was John?
Very, very easygoing. He would just sit down and start talking about anything, and pretty soon he'd be asking questions. Pull his tablet out and start taking notes.
That's what I was going to ask you. How did he take notes? He just write them?
He always had a spiral notebook, and he wrote out his the answers. The interview. Wrote everything in longhand.
Did he ever use a recorder, a tape recorder that you know of?
He never did.
What did he write his stories? Was it just a typewriter, or was it a computer? Was it both?
Well, at first it was a typewriter. He would write his notes in longhand. The interview, and then when he got home, he would type them. He would take his notes and type them. At first on a typewriter and then a computer, and so then he'd have the printed notes, and then later he would write the column.
Do you know if the typewriter was a manual or electric, or do you recall?
It was an electric.
Electric, okay.
Yeah.
Would he ever ask you to read over his story, to offer any
Critique
kind
it?
of critique?
No.
Did you want to sometimes? But he didn't want you to, huh?
A couple of times I, would read and maybe make a suggestion, but I don't know that he ever followed. He was much, much better than I was.
Now, you said, Jane, that his colleagues said that John worked real hard on his writing. What do you think they meant by that?
I think John studied other journalists' writing. Phil Record was one that he admired, and
Now, Phil Record was...
He was an editor at the Star Telegram.
Okay.
And I think when John started there, I think Phil kind of took him under his wing and showed him the ropes. And Phil was an excellent journalist. And Phil told a story one time about, I think maybe they were on the police beat, and John was like following him around, listening to him, and he would, when Phil finished his story, John would write his own version, and then he would compare it, and he would look at Phil's, and Phil said that John would comment about, well, I wish I had used that word. And he learned from observing experienced writers.
Experienced writers, yeah.
Yeah.
And John was probably young
Oh,
at
yeah,
the time. I
yeah.
mean, do you know about what age he was when he started with the
With the Star Telegram?
And was that the first paper that he
No,
started?
he worked for, he worked for the Grand Prairie paper before he went to the Star Telegram, and then he was at another paper right out of college. I can't remember what it was. It was down close to Bryan College Station. But he was around 26, 25, 26
That's pretty young.
when he started at the Star Telegram.
And at that time, the Star Telegram was known for outstanding writers, correct? I mean, they had some experience, good writers. And John probably learned a lot from them, didn't he? Yeah. Do you recall, Jane, a favorite column or a story that John wrote?
I couldn't say that I couldn't mention just one column. There were so many. One thing that I thought he did a really, really good job on was in his book, John McConnell's Texas, when he wrote about his dad. And I thought that was excellent.
Why do you think so? What was it?
Well, it was well, part of it, I'm sure, is because of me and loving him and his family, but it was just so sweet and kind and loving, really.
They had a good relationship.
They had an interesting relationship. I think John's dad was a tough taskmaster.
Not unlike a lot of fathers of the day, probably.
And but they got along well.
Now there was a period, Jane, I'm not totally clear on this, but was John born in West Texas or okay? So
He
tell
was
us a
born
little
in
bit about-
Pecos.
In Pecos, okay. And so he lived there for a while, and then
They lived there until I think John was about 11, 10 to 12, and they moved to Midlothian, and then they moved to Glenrose.
so in West Texas, in Pecos, what did his father do? Was he a farmer, a
He
rancher?
was a rancher, and he was a auctioneer. And for a while, I'm not sure when this was, but John's parents had a little grocery store somewhere out there.
Did John talk much about, would he go with his father like to these auctions? Or
He did. He went some. I
Did
don't
he,
think he participated, but I think he,
did he
was
tell you
watching.
much about his life out there when, his first 10, 11 years of his life in West Texas? Was it?
Not a whole lot. Talked more about the weather, dry, and the wind and
Right.
the heat.
Why did they move to Midlothian, do you think?
I don't know why they moved to Midlothian. I know that when John said that, some of his family lived in Goldthwaite and some other area down there, and he commented about how when they would come to that area, he just thought it was absolutely beautiful because of the trees and and they all had pecan orchards. He thought it was just wonderful. I suspect that his parents moved here because of the weather. I mean, and his dad raised cattle and wanted to be here.
And I'm assuming, I don't know this, but I'm assuming that they came to Glenrose where his father bought land there in Glenrose to, yeah. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It was right off 144,
Yeah.
or on 144.
Far northern Summerall County, I guess, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Did John tell you much about his days in Glenrose, going to school there, and what was that like for him? Did he share some stories?
I don't know that it was any different than most of us in the 50s. Small town, everybody knew everybody. He had a lot of friends. Well, like I said, everybody knew everybody else, so we were all good friends. And he and his brother helped his dad a lot, and one thing they did is they grew peanuts, and he was always talking about growing peanuts and the peanut crop and how much work that was.
Not many peanuts around here anymore, right?
I don't think so.
Jane, did John share with you about the day that he helped carry Lee Harvey Oswald's casket?
He talked a lot about, from the time Kennedy was shot, and he was on an assignment in Gatesville when Kennedy was shot, and he was covering a trial down there. And he said he was on the second floor of the building, and they were waiting for the jury to come back, and the jury was deliberating. And he was at a window, and he looked out, and he noticed that nobody was on the streets, on the sidewalks. And what had happened is they had announced that Kennedy had been shot, and people had gone into the stores to watch TV or to find out about it. And but anyway, then of course John stayed. He had the assignment down there, and then when he came back, the day that Oswald was buried, several of them were assigned to go over and cover the event.
So, several of the writers.
Several of the Star Telegram reporters.
Yeah.
And John knew the man that was the undertaker that I guess handled the body and the service. And he asked John and other writers if they would carry the casket because there was no family there no pallbearers. And so I think these reporters reluctantly agreed that yes, they would do it, and mainly out of courtesy to the undertaker. And it was, I know John was a huge fan of Kennedy's, and I think a lot of the others were too. So it was hard for him.
Do you know, Jane, if John, you said he stayed there in Gatesville to finish the trial, cover the trial, and finish that. Do you know when he came back, did they assign him to any type of story that was related to the assassination of Kennedy? Do you know?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
Okay, all right. You said one time that John was in the newsroom when the flash came over, or however that happened. I guess the tape saying that that Bobby Kennedy had been shot.
Mm-hmm.
And you might want to tell that story.
Well, it came across, I think that it was a tape, wasn't it, that the message came out on a tape, and I don't know if John saw it. I think maybe somebody else saw it and told him, and he realized how important it was. And he was the Night City editor at the time, and so he went down to the press room and told the foreman to stop the presses, that they were going to have to change the main story. And then he called the editor. I don't remember what his title would have been. It was Mr. Butler is all I know. And he told him what he'd done, and he said, "You what?" And John just knew he was going to be fired. But anyway, they got the story out, and it was in the paper the next morning.
Oh, that's great. One thing I neglected to ask you about on the President Kennedy's assassination, didn't John had a working relationship with either Lee Harvey Oswald's mother or Lee Harvey Oswald's wife?
It was his mother.
His mother.
I don't know the whole story on that, but I think she was, well, of course, distraught, and was probably talking to anybody that would listen to her about what had happened. And of course, she didn't think that her son had done it. And but John talked to her a couple of times on the phone. I'm not sure if he ever met with her. I don't know for sure.
Did she call the Star-Telegram office? Is it the paper? Is
That's
that what
the story
happened?
I heard, that she called and
Trying to get information, or?
I think she wanted a ride to Dallas.
Okay.
And but I just know John talked to her.
John didn't take her, didn't drive her to
I
Dallas.
don't think so.
Okay. All right. She was wanting, a ride or information, and that was back during the day where, I mean, it was kind of not nonchalant, but not like today where it's so rigid on the rules and all.
Yeah,
I mean,
no restrictions.
People would call the Star-Telegram for not just for
Right.
for stories. They just, okay, it's a clearinghouse, or it's somebody that they can talk to, or right. That probably
Well, I
happened
know
a lot.
when John started, when he was had the police beat, that reporters would ride in the police cars, with the policemen, and the suspect would be right there. I mean, it was very casual. And
Casual, that was the word I was
yeah,
looking for.
it was
Yeah.
like, they didn't care.
Yeah. So John started off on the police beat at the Star-Telegram, is that right?
He was on the police
On the
beat. That's when he followed Phil Record around trying to learn what he could. And then he went to Farm and Ranch.
And they probably, working on the police beat, they probably went to all kinds of crime scenes and bust and all kinds of things. Do you recall any kind of stories he shared with you about those? Anything interesting? Like a murder scene?
Not really. He didn't. He told me some pretty gross things that the suspects said or did, but not anything about a crime scene.
Did he help cover the Cullen Davis
No,
murder?
no.
Okay, didn't do that.
That
He
was
was
it.
already out.
Mhm.
Okay, he went to Farm and Ranch. What did he do? What did he do there? What did he write with Farm and Ranch?
I'm not really sure, Roger, what he did with Farm and Ranch. He never talked that much about it.
Mhm.
I know one thing he did that he really enjoyed is a FFA chapter went to a convention, I think it was in Chicago. Anyway, rode a bus, the whole group, and John went with them. He, wrote stories along the way, and he said that was really a lot of fun.
His columns, Jane, and that's, he did that for years. That's where he finished his career, right? Was writing columns. Was it 3 times a week, right? Three times a week.
3 columns a week. Yeah.
What kind of columns did he enjoy the most, do you think, writing?
I'm not sure I think he enjoyed all of them. Probably the more interesting person that he interviewed, he would enjoy that more. He loved the human interest aspect. He talked a lot about the couple that he wrote about that had fostered, 12 or 13 children. It was a lot. And that was a really good column. I remember that.
It seemed like just that John could take just like maybe a common man, a common person, and really pull out and really his writing skill was just so great and made that column so readable. And how he did that's very difficult to do, but it seemed like he was able to pull that out.
Well, he always said everybody has a story if you just sit and listen. And I think that was the secret to his successful writing, is that he was a good listener. And if you stop and think about it, if you listen to people, everybody's got something to tell, some interesting story to tell.
Anything else, Jane?
No.
Oh, the man.
Yeah.
The man. Okay. We've discussed a lot, Jane, about John McConal, the writer. So, what about John McConal, the man? What did you see?
He was very sensitive. Like I said, he had a great sense of humor. And I think that fact that he was so sensitive contributed to his writing ability. And being content to listen to what other people had to say and then writing it. And he was just a good man.
Walk across Texas and bridges over the rails.
John wrote 2 books, or at least 2, maybe more than that.
Yes, yeah.
Talk about these books a little bit, Jane. How that.
Well, the first
how that
book,
started.
actually, the first book that he helped Al Strickland with. Al, was the piano player for Bob Wills. And Al was writing a book about Bob Wills. I think it's My Years with Bob Wills. And apparently Al was having trouble. He wasn't a professional writer, and he knew John, so he asked John if he would help him with this book, and so he did. And that was the first one that John assisted with. And then after he retired, we had a book published that was just his columns, and that one's John McConal's Texas. And then he met Eddie Lane, and Eddie and John talked about walking across Texas, walking through Texas and writing, and they developed that, and that was a walk across Texas. And then from there, it went to Bridges over the Brazos, which was essentially the same type thing.
Would John share with you much about writing those books and his travels and meeting people, and did he talk much to you about that?
Well, yes, of course, we were here then, and I was working then, and so I was aware of everything that was going on. And it was a lot of research on those books, and I would help him, not in the writing, but looking for things, and so I was, I was very much aware of what was going on with that.
Jane, you're talking about research, and this was probably before the internet, or right when the internet was maybe in its infancy, and maybe you didn't have then, like we do today, and search the internet and have all kinds of information pop up, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. John did lots of telephoning and writing letters, and using, the resource of other people that he knew that would have insight into certain things. And
would he use the libraries? Any
he
of
used
the
the library.
libraries?
The Hood County Library was a big help to him.
Anything else, Jane, that you like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you, Jane McConal, for visiting with us about your love of your life.
Yeah, you're welcome.
John McConal, talented man, sensitive man, wonderful man. Thank you.
You're welcome.